All right, welcome everybody to another edition of the IUPUI, or Sport Management Club at IUPUI's virtual speaker series. Today we've got a new guest in town, and he's from the other side of the United States, the same kind of similar to Eric Smith from LA. He's coming at us from Seattle, Washington. It's one of the group sales executives from account executives from the Seattle Mariners by the name of Mike Mendolia. He is coming to us live from Seattle, but he's from Pennsylvania. So we'll get into that here in a couple of minutes. But Mike, glad to have you on here tonight.
Hey, Jeffrey, glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining us. So tonight, Mike's going to give us he's going to discuss some things, and I'll go into that in a moment. But I also want to remind you guys that, tonight we've got the NBA draft special that we're doing live on YouTube. Tune in on that. So stay on YouTube after this, 7:30, we'll be on there. But Mike, I want to get started with you and just let's talk a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are out in Seattle today.
Yeah, so like you said, I grew up in Pennsylvania. I went to a small school out by Pittsburgh, California University of Pennsylvania, and really ended up there because they had a sport management program. And so once I found that, I was like, okay, great, that sounds good. Not really knowing what the program entails or what it even meant. I just knew that I like sports and I wanted to go to college. And so that's really how I ended up there. So my 4 years there, I was a sport management major and a marketing major. So I double majored while I was there just to get a little bit more of a business background. Our sport management program wasn't in the business school. It still actually isn't in the business school. So I wanted to get a little bit more of a well-rounded in terms of classes and stuff like that. So, as I was wrapping up on campus, I had done a bunch of things while I was there, worked for the athletic department and did a bunch of ops type things. And really as I was getting into my senior year, I kind of realized that the early mornings and every day, every weekend and setting up tables and doing all of the things that, you have to do on the ops side was not what I wanted to do. And so I am going into my senior year after doing some internships, and a lot of that stuff ended up being ops or a bunch of minor league sports. As Kyle knows, in Harrisburg, it's kind of the minor league capital of the world. There's probably about 10 or 15 minor league teams that are all around there. And most of the experience I had in ops, and I realized, like I said, it just wasn't for me. And so, after talking with some people on campus, I my last year joined the Welcome Center, and so I gave campus tours. And as I tell people now, I didn't realize this then. When you're giving campus tours, you're building relationships, you're asking questions, you're building a rapport with the client or the prospective family. Really, you're selling campus. And so as I was finishing up an internship, I did community relations with the Flyers, which was kind of tough. I'm a diehard Rangers fan. It's probably the one New York sport that I still follow pretty regularly. The last question in the interview, he asked if I was a Penguins fan, and because I said no, I got the job. So that at least it helped me out there. But CR was really what I wanted to do, as I'm sure many people fall in that same bucket. You hear a lot of, I want to do community relations, I want to do marketing, and that's right. In CR, it's the fun job. You're traveling around, you're bringing good things and everybody wants to talk to you, as opposed to sales. You're kind of the boogeyman and nobody wants to talk to you. So what I realized when I was in with the Flyers and it was wrapping up, they had a community department of 5 people. 2 of them were full-time with the organization. One of them won a Stanley Cup with the team. And then there were interns. And so I realized pretty early on that, it's going to be hard to stay in that vertical within an organization. And so I was applying for jobs. My high water mark was 84 applications out at one point, and stumbled across a sales job at the Mariners. And what I found in terms of building my resume and trying to figure out, I didn't really have any hardcore sales experience. It clicked that giving campus tours was my sales experience. So in my interview, I talked about, how giving tours on campus and how that would relate to selling, and it really worked for me. It really resonated. And now in any type of conversation I have with our sport management program, is I always refer people, go to the Welcome Center and give tours, and you really get an understanding of the types of things that you'll ask and what selling is really like. And so coming out of school with campus tours as my only sales background, I took the job at the Mariners. I got an interview. Things went well. They offered me the job, and I moved out here, and that was really how I ended up here. I didn't come to the city before I moved here. I flew out here 3 days before my first day of work with 2 bags I checked on the airplane. Went to the ballpark the day before my first day, and then showed up and was on our inside sales team. At the time it was a 1 year thing. So I moved out here with the understanding that, hey, if I don't like it, I could always move back home and find something closer to where I grew up or closer to family and stuff like that. And now it turned out to work really well. So first year was in inside sales, got promoted to our group sales team from there, and then went up to our season ticket team was kind of our natural progression.
Yes,
Uh,
my fault. I demoted him. That was my fault. I mixed up his titles here. He's the account executive in premium sales, not group. So, yes, I demoted him. That was my fault.
No, well, sometimes my wife would tell me I deserve it. But I went from groups to season tickets again. Here, our sales department was still relatively new. In 2012 was our first real inside sales program. So a lot of teams had things set up before we did. So our natural progression was inside sales to groups to season tickets to premium. And so got all the way to season tickets. We are from Pennsylvania. My wife is from Pittsburgh, and we were starting a family. We were getting ready to have our first kid, and we panicked and said, "Oh no, we need to move closer to family." And so got a job with the Pirates that was in group sales. So I kind of went backwards. Um, you know, it's a little bit more unique. I always joke my career path was pretty standard all the way up until I left Seattle to go to Pittsburgh. I went back to groups because one, I like selling groups and suites more than season tickets. Frankly, they're much easier. Somebody's invested in one day as opposed to invested in 81 or 20 games or whatever their season ticket plan is. It's a lot more dependent on team performance. And if you follow baseball at all, you realize that the Pirates since 2015 have not been very good, and the Mariners have not been very good since 2001. It was the last time we made the playoffs, so considerably longer than that. So spent 2 years in Pittsburgh on the group sales team. We realized then that my experience at the Pirates just wasn't as positive as it was out here. And so I was starting to get to the point that maybe it's time to look for something else outside of sports, or look for something that's somewhere else that we could go. And because I had kept up with some of my coworkers here, the premium job came open for the Mariners. They called me and asked if we would come back. 2 weeks later, I was driving back, and we made the jump back out to the Pacific Northwest and kind of continued back on that normal career progression. So, had jumped around, and we just realized that Seattle was where we wanted to be. So when we had the opportunity to come back, we really jumped at coming back. And I did premium because one, it's kind of a mix of groups and suites and season tickets and our higher end suite packages and stuff like that. So, I have a little bit more of the things I don't like. The premium buyer, I'm sure as we can talk about a little bit later on, the premium buyer is much different than the general fan, in terms of why they're coming to the ballpark and the experience and stuff like that. So it's not as difficult of a conversation when you're talking to someone who, has $100,000 to burn on tickets versus someone who's a diehard fan and the team hasn't made the playoffs in 22 years and they live and die by everything that happens on the field. So the premium job was just kind of the next logical step for me. And we've been back here now since 2017. And, for now, there's no plans of going anywhere. Obviously, things can always change pretty quickly, sometimes not in your control with COVID and things like that. But so my career path started out pretty standard and then got a little goofy because we moved back home and then came back out. It doesn't normally happen that people go to the same team, but it's worked out well for me so far.
So your progression is a little bit different. You've got obviously the appropriate progression through the sales portion, right? But I'm looking here at your LinkedIn profile, and y'all can look him up if you'd like. I see that you've got the office and events intern at the PIAA, and you've got the university ambassador, and you've got then your community relations intern. You talked about CR being what you really were interested in. What made you, I guess, take that detour?
Yeah. So really I always joke that internships are super important, as everybody knows, but internships are almost more important to understand what you don't want to do than what you do want to do. And so I went for the CR job because it's what I really wanted to do. When I was still a student, every time we'd have someone come in and talk like this, and they said, who doesn't want to do sales? Like I was jumping out of my chair, like not something I
Every
ever even
student ever.
everybody. It's everybody, right? And so I did the CR internship because it's what I wanted to do, and I figured if I'm going to have a chance in going that route, I want to try and get a direct experience in that department somewhere. And it just so happened to work out. My time with the Flyers was awesome. We traveled around all summer and played street hockey. A lot of your students probably don't know who Bob Kelly is if they're not big hockey fans, but he won Stanley. The Flyers haven't been very good either. So if you're noticing a trend in the teams that I've worked for, Bob Kelly won 2 Stanley Cups with them in the 70s. And so, we got old stories of, Bob's a Western Canadian guy who is exactly like you would think a Canadian hockey guy would be. So we'd get all the stories and stuff like that. It was really positive in terms of, teaching kids how to play hockey and stuff like that. But like I said, it kind of in the intro is that the department is really small, and part of the department included a multi Stanley Cup winner with the team. And I realized that is not like, I'll never fill that role. And if you look around at a lot of teams, part of their community departments are former players because they're the face, right? And it's easy. It brings the recognition. It brings more people to their events and things like that. And so, when I was applying, like I said, I had 84 applications out. I applied to anything I thought was remotely interesting, whether I was qualified or not. I just threw my hat in the ring because the worst thing is it wasted 15 minutes of my day. Best case, I'd get an interview. Of those 80 plus, I think I interviewed 5 or 6 times, so it wasn't even very many out of that group. But when I got the interview and got offered the job out here the first time, I had the chance to talk to the VP of sales of the Flyers at the time, and he said, "Hey, Mike, you know what? I kind of can get that you're worried about going so far away. You really might not be into sales, but are you willing to wait 12 months, a year and a half, 2 years for another job?" And as soon as I said no, he said, "All right, have fun in Seattle." And at that point, it was really that makes sense. Let's just go try it for a year and see what happens. And it ended up being way different than I thought.
So attendees, don't forget to drop your questions in the Q&A section as well as on YouTube. Don't hesitate to drop questions you might have for Mike. So I want to shift a little bit to something a little bit off your resume and things. Changing from Pennsylvania to Washington State, the culture shift. Talk a little bit about how it felt to go somewhere so different. I think I would say it's very different, just the culture being out west as opposed to Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I will say, I'll as you can tell, I like talking, but I like answering questions more. So please do ask questions, so I don't have to talk for forever. But the culture is definitely different. I talk really fast, as most East Coast people tend to do. Like we were talking about before, my family's from New York, so you add that maybe at times 10 on how fast people talk. So you really have to slow down a little bit out here. It's much more laid back. People are generally nicer here, but they will blow you off after that first time. Whereas on the East Coast, as you guys are familiar with, people are generally maybe a little bit harder to break through, but there's a lot of follow up. So I always use the sports bar as the example. So on the East Coast, games start at 7:00. Going to the bar, going to watch a game is a social event because they start at 7:00. So it's easy. You go out, you have Mariner stuff on. I have Mariner stuff on. We're both watching the game. Chances are on these coasts, you two are probably going to talk to each other about this, that, or the other. And if at the end of the night they say, "Hey, this was great. It's good to meet you. I'm new in town. Here's my number. Would love to, hang out again, or would love to let me know when you're coming back down to watch another game, and I'll come down and we'll catch up a little bit." Versus here, games start at 4:00 during the week. The late game is on at 7:00. So you get a lot of people who go out after the game is over here. So you don't get as much of the social aspect. And you have that same conversation, two people in Mariners gear. You talk, you have a good time, and you say, "Hey, here's my number. Let me know when you're coming back," and you never hear from them again. So they're open to talking more. So that took a little bit of getting used to, but we had a good group in the office, so kind of made friends that way, and was able to beat the Seattle freeze, as people tend to talk about. But out here the air is cleaner. You can go out in the woods and you get some green all over the place, where back east things are a little bit more condensed and a little bit tighter together. So over time, after adjusting to the slower pace out here, it seems a lot harder. Like going to Pittsburgh was a lot harder to speed back up and realize that people are going to talk much faster, people are going to be much more brash on the phone and things like that. So I've really enjoyed the move. It's nice to be able to slow down a little bit, but I still have old habits that are hard to break.
And the income level is a little bit different out there, I would assume. With being in a sales position, you kind of have to look at what's the household income look like.
Yeah, for sure. Seattle's super expensive, so that certainly doesn't help things when you're just starting. But our office is unique in our comp plans that we really don't have commission at all. We're all high base, and so you don't have to worry about the team hasn't made the playoffs in 21 years, and you have or Robbie just got suspended again today for steroids for the second time. But when he got suspended the first time, Robinson Cano, when he got suspended the first time, he was out here and it was in May. And so you get something like that tanks the money that you would make the rest of the year. And all of a sudden you're making $10,000-$15,000 less than you thought. So, we don't have that added stress, which is nice. So, but that's a direct correlation to the cost of living out here, that our comp plans and things like that are set up much differently, because you have to account for how expensive it is to live in the Pacific Northwest.
So thinking about your path, right? What do you think are some of the more important, I guess, skills that you've gained throughout your time moving into what now is a pretty high level sales position? What kind of skills do you think it takes to try to get in that area?
Yeah, the biggest thing is just have no fear, right? Sales is awkward. It feels awkward because it is. You think about how awkward it can be talking to somebody you've never talked to before. But I'll use you or Kyle as an example, right? We meet at the bar and we both have the same team's gear on, right? The first thing I'm going to ask you is, who's your favorite player? Do you go to games? How many games do you go to? I go this, that, or the other. Where do you normally sit? I sit on the third baseline. And really, the only difference between that conversation at the bar and that conversation over the phone is, one, you're probably going to swear less over the phone. And two, I'm going to ask you for a credit card at the end of the phone conversation, versus I'm not going to ask for your credit card at the bar, because that would be weird. So really just being able to have a conversation with somebody, being able to be okay with being uncomfortable is another big one, and really having no fear. The thing that maybe took the longest time to develop is to be okay with silence. As new reps, you always feel like you need to fill the open air. But sometimes the most impactful thing you could do is, if I ask you, how do you feel about that, and just let it go. And I've waited for 30 seconds before the person I was talking to eventually answered what I was asking. But it takes a little bit of time to be able to do that. So, the biggest thing is just be okay with being uncomfortable, being okay with failing, because everybody does. They just never talk about it.
Who would you say are some of the more influential people that you've come across? We preach in our program a lot about networking and talking to people and getting your name out there and personal branding and things like that. What are the more, I guess you've had people along the way. First, tell us about that. And then what do you think are some of those, I guess, soft skills that maybe that these students should have?
Yeah, for sure. So couple of our professors are still there. Dr. Miller now runs our sport management program, and I still talk to her today. And so, that's really helped. I'm still engaged with our program and things like that. So, they were really our first resource into the industry and into, being a professional. Outside of the program, we had our person who ran all of our student activities and stuff like that. Her name's Melissa Dunn. Uh, we opened up a brand new arena on campus, and because I wasn't even working for her. I was in student government, which she was the advisor for. She said, "Hey, you want to be in sports? We just opened this arena. We need someone to do the in-arena entertainment. You're doing it. Thanks." And I'd never talked on a microphone before. Like, I'd never done any of the stuff I had to write. It was like trivia. It was like silly things, right? Things that you see in standard, like guess the year and all that kind of stuff. But I had to come up with all the things that we used. I had to put it all together. I had to bring it over on game day. I had to find the prizes that we were using and work with the athletic department and stuff like that. So she was really big on, here you go. I know you can do it, so I'm going to make you do it. And again, I was uncomfortable as a college student, but that helped me get comfortable with being that way. So, as far as developing soft skills, I mean, you want to find people like that. The thing that I found now, again, this is an East Coast thing. Like, I want constructive criticism. I want somebody to challenge me, versus out here, people are a little bit more not in your face. They may not tell you exactly how they feel, and you go through some of those things. But those are the people that are going to teach you those skills much faster. So you want to try and find people that, you don't want somebody to be a bully, right? There's a difference between being constructive and being helpful and being mean. But you generally want to try and find, whether it's a professor or an advisor on campus that is going to challenge you, because those are the people that are going to help you develop. Like, how do you write an email, and how do you do all of these things that seem now so simple and so easy. But you realize as a college student, right, you've never written an email before, so you don't know what it's supposed to say or how do you start it and all of that. So generally, it's finding those people that are going to challenge you and tell you sometimes what you don't want to hear are going to be the ones that are going to help you much more in the long run.
So how about those throughout? Seattle Mariners, you've been there a couple of times, and the Pittsburgh Pirates, you were there, and the Flyers, you were there. What about folks from there? Is there anybody that really stood out and helped kind of guide you along the path to get where you are now?
Yeah. My first go around here, he was a premium rep at the time, John Kelly, who actually was another PSAC, another Pennsylvania kid that was out here. So we had that. And in my first conversation in terms of coming out, I called in. He talked to me for 45 minutes. Didn't have to do it. Just about what's it like moving here, and what's the city like, and what areas are okay to live in, and what areas to avoid, and all of that. And so he was from Philly, so while it's not the same area of the state, it was close. So we had a lot of things in common. And so, it's kind of, when I first got here, he went out of his way to make sure, like, hey, why don't you come over for dinner, or let's go grab dinner, and let's make sure you're comfortable in terms of just living here and moving here in the first place. And over the course of that year, then he had really, again, our program was brand new back then, so I didn't really do any sales training. It was, here's how to use our software, here's your book of business, dial 91 to dial out, and have at it. And so he was the one that, out of his own time, he was still selling, took an hour every week, sometimes multiple hours in a week, to do sales training with me. That was one-on-one. And so without John, it would be, I probably wouldn't have stuck around after that first year. I was the only one out of our class of 4 that stayed on full time after the fact. And a testament to him, the training didn't stop after that first year. It went through the first 3 years that I was here. Even when he was managing a team, still found the time to help me with things when I had questions and stuff like that. Some of my colleagues with the Pirates, a lot of them are not there anymore, unfortunately, because of COVID. That helped along the way, changing to a new environment and understanding a new process. My boss at the Pirates was great too. Cassie Wilkinson. She's not there anymore either, unfortunately. But Cassie's big thing were thank you cards and handwritten notes, and really big on follow up, which we didn't do any of that in Seattle. And so, I was able to use some of that to carry over, and really the power of what a handwritten card brings. So now I kind of incorporate in my day to day with leaving cards on people's seats, whether I've talked to them or not, or just hey, hope you guys enjoy the game, and those sorts of things. And it has a big impact. And so Cassie's helped me carry that over. In my second go around, JP Ryan, now out here, he's technically my boss now, although we were friends before I left. So I always kind of give him a hard time now that I call him boss instead. But he was big part of the reason why I was able to come back. He called me. I was actually in the office in Pittsburgh, and he said, hey, we had somebody accept a promotion and then put in their 2 weeks notice, and they had some tough luck with outside hires. And he was kind of my champion on saying, hey, I think Mike would come back. I think we should bring him back, and really kind of advocated for me. So, there are a couple kind of along the way that were peers at the time to then became managers that have helped me as a rep. And ultimately, my aspiration after this, I don't want to sell forever. It's too stressful for me to be able to do it. Ideally leading a team sooner rather than later. So they've been really big in terms of, start what are things that I could do as a rep to help transition into being a leader or part of a management team and having success right away and not having that learning curve. It's okay to have a learning curve as a sales rep because you're only really impacting yourself. But if you have a learning curve as a sales manager, now you're impacting your whole team. And I don't want to put my reps at a disadvantage because I'm still learning how to do some of those things.
So you mentioned thank you cards and handwritten notes. Is that something that is going across the board with your group? Is that something that's kind of been more infectious since you said you did it in Pittsburgh, but you didn't do it in Seattle? Have you brought that mentality now to Seattle?
Yeah, we definitely have had more of our group do it. We not last year, 2 years ago now, 2019, we had fans in the building. Our diamond clubs, so the first 8 rows behind home plate, all of your food and drinks and stuff are included, right? Your standard Major League Baseball best seats in the house. Ours are maybe not as common as other. We have a full bar, so you walk in there, you can do whatever you want, drink whatever you want, eat whatever you want. We had single game inventory down there for the first time in a couple of years. And so the day of game, we would go and find who bought single game tickets, whether it was through Ticketmaster or StubHub, and left handwritten cards on their seats to try and sell them, saying, hey, we have partial season plans available. And we sold, maybe 8 or 10 plans just from those handwritten cards. So purely from a revenue perspective, it's worked really well. But on the customer service side, current members, we've had, you get the standard, they email your boss and say, hey, so and so left a card on my seat. We've never had a rep do that in over 20 years. So we've had a lot of that, but really it impacted in ways that are maybe a little bit more subtle. So we rolled out an engagement program where we have gifts on hand that we could just say, hey, Kyle, I haven't put a face to the name yet. I have something I want to give you. Let me know when you get to the ballpark and come down and say hello. So it's anything from like autographed baseballs to old giveaways, or, we've had some higher end edit, we've had booze, we've had wine glasses, we've had all those kinds of things. And, where I found the power of the handwritten card has helped is you get a season ticket member that says, hey, you know what, our neighborhood's coming out. One of the kids, his dad just passed away. Do you have anything that you could give, just something cool, right, to help them through whatever they're going through? And so I've had a lot of impact from members by using the engagement program that we have that is technically this gift is for Kyle. Kyle doesn't know that this is for him because I'm giving it to the neighborhood kid instead, and writing a card that says something as simple as, hey, Kyle, we heard you're going through some tough stuff. We had Kyle Lewis sign this baseball for you. Hope things get better for you soon. Hang in there, that kind of stuff. And the phone calls I've gotten from people, I've had people, grown men, for lack of a better term, call and cry on the phone and be like, man, we everybody in the group was crying because of stuff like that. And as you'll find, those are the kinds of things that'll keep people buying and coming back, because they know that they can't get that same level of service, that same level of impact just by buying single game tickets.
In the off chance, Mike, that I get a student that says, yes, I want to do sales for the rest of my life. If I get that off chance student that says that, well, how should I direct them in terms of hospitality and customer service and learning the things that you were talking about right here? Because all too often, I think students see sales as the revenue generating part and the cold calling or warm calling and things like that, but they don't see that human side, the customer service hospitality side. How can we do a better job, I think, of getting that across to them?
Yeah. I mean, that's really what scared me away from sales, right? You talk to most hardcore salespeople and they say you have to make 100 calls a day, you have to have 25 meetings a week and do all these things. And that really scared me away from it. The biggest thing that I would say that helped me learn, right? People want to do marketing a lot, is always the general, what do you want to do? I want to be in marketing. Well, if you look, using Major League Baseball as an example, if you look at a group tickets page, a lot of times you'll navigate to group events, and everybody knows that teams do these group events. There are Game of Thrones nights, there's yoga, there's this, that, a Girl Scout, Boy Scout, whatever. And you don't just sell 1,000 tickets for a Boy Scout day at the ballpark just from selling. You're doing marketing and you're doing advertising and you're doing all of these things. And so sales is really kind of all encompassing, right? At the end of the day, your goal is to drive revenue, but you're doing all of those other things that people say they want to do. The biggest thing from a sales perspective that I know now, it's just about people. It's about relationships. It's about all of those things. And so you're doing it. It's the full package. And again, for us, in terms of being unique, we sell and service. So we don't have a retention department. So a lot of teams like the Pirates, you had a new business team, and then you had a service and retention team. So I sell them year one. Great. You get halfway through the season, they move to Kyle on the retention team. I don't deal with them anymore at all. And so you get a little bit more of that really cold. It's really more just about the transaction and you send them over. Whereas for us, it really is about the relationship building, and our best sales, our biggest sales come from, I'll use a real example. Country Financial is someone who I took over when I got here 3 years ago. I had two different reps doing two suites each. And so in conversations, realize that they kind of know each other and say, hey, is there anybody else there that maybe would do something similar? If you can get to 10, your cost is going to drop from, having to pick these Sunday games because the price is the lowest, at $2,800 to, if we can get you to 10, you can pick whatever game you want. And the average is about $2,100. So you benefit off of everybody else coming in because you now can pick whatever game you want. And because you were first, I'm going to let you pick first and not let the new guy take the best game, right? And so year one, they did 4 suites and spent maybe 10 grand total. Year two, we had the conversation on, hey, let's do 10 games. Let's get you to 10. Had a couple meetings with them. And next thing you know, I'm talking with someone from Illinois from their corporate office. They went from spending 10 grand to spending 100 grand to do a half season. They could brand the suite. They got all of their regional offices involved in the state. And the reason why I use that example all the time is because of our ability that we sell and service. I didn't have to tell Mike and Dane that say, you got to get to 10 this year. You got to do it. You got to do it. Because if I didn't get them to 10 in the first year, they'd go to the retention department. I was able to keep them and build the trust and build the relationship to say, hey, here is why I think you should do this. On the call where I was pitching them doing 10 or 20 games in a suite, I actually told them, we don't see anybody go from a handful of suites to 40. It doesn't happen. We usually see people go from a handful to 10 and then from 10 to 20 or 20 to 40. And so flat out just said like, hey, we don't see anybody do this. I'm just telling you that this is at 40 games, we allow them to brand their suite. So the biggest difference is, 10, 20, you're in just a regular suite versus at 40, you're in the Country Financial Suite. And the other 40 games of the year, someone else is in the Country Financial Suite staring at Country Financial's logo for 4 hours. And just very much 40-minute conversation, 3 minutes of it was about that branding aspect. And next, they spent 100 grand because they like the branding. And so, again, it's all about building trust and building the relationship and stuff like that. You use Comcast as an example, right? You say, oh, I had to call Comcast. Everybody's reaction is, oh, how crappy was that, right? Their customer service is terrible. And so, you can use those real life examples. And again, like the internships, learning about what you don't want to do, you can use your real life examples on what you appreciate when you're getting good customer service. So you just emulate those same things. And so, sales now is really kind of the all encompassing against the whole thing, especially in the way that our department is set up and that we sell and service. You can't be a jerk and you can't oversell somebody that first year, because if I oversell you in year one, you're never coming back. And that doesn't help anybody.
So shifting gears a little bit, and I'm kind of bouncing around a little bit, but with everything that happened this year, with the COVID hitting in February, March, and you guys having to go a completely different route than what you're used to, being someone that was part of a franchise that kind of experienced that, can you explain how everything went down? How did everything how did the dominoes fall for the Seattle Mariners? I saw it fall from the statistician and table crew game ops side, but how did you guys see it from A, being on a different coast, and B, being in probably the hottest spot at the beginning of all of this?
Yeah. It's jumping around is fine. I love chaos. I have 2 kids, so chaos in our house is every day. So kind of a funny story in that, so Seattle started off as kind of the place not to be. And so in March, my wife was 8 months, 9 months pregnant at that point. We had a baby in April. So we were getting to the very end of that. So she was really high risk. We have a 4-year-old who was in daycare at the time. And so we made the decision about 2 weeks before everything closed to pull him out of school. And so what that meant for me, she was working full time, I was working full time, that 2 days a week I was at home. And so it just so happened that second week of March, I was at home when our game got canceled the night the NBA shut down. So I was home that day. And then the next day, when they said spring training is done, like we're pausing, I was at home. And so putting my 4-year-old down for nap, and I forgot to mute my computer, and all I hear is ding, ding, ding. I went to put him down for nap with probably 4 or 5 emails, to coming back, 25 minutes later, he's still awake because he's like, Dad, what's going on out there, to 45 emails because everything just went crazy. And then that Monday, we were all sent home and said, so March 16th, was our last day in the office. And they said, we're shutting the office down for 2 weeks. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks. And it's now the middle of November, and we're still at home. And so for us, our challenge was the season never started. And so, while the NBA and the NHL had played pretty much a full season, we were still kind of in that limbo of, one, are we even going to play at all? And then 2, when are we going to play? Because there was no chance that we were playing opening day when it was scheduled. So we were working from home, and it was really like, we don't really know what to do. And our managers knew we weren't really doing anything, but we were still getting paid our full salary. So that was cool to work for a half an hour to answer the odd email here and there, because we really didn't have anything to do. And we were so naive back then to think we'll be back in the office in 2 weeks. So once that initial kind of wave kind of died off, and it was, okay, this is going to be a little bit longer than we thought, we started doing a lot of data entry. So going and finding new contacts for businesses, or going and doing prospecting to find new businesses to start calling when we're all back in the office, and really just trying to clean up our CRM and clean up some of those things. As April turned into May, things started to get a little bit more tense, because it was are we going to play? If we do, are we going to have fans? If we have fans, that means we're all probably still going to have jobs, versus, are we not going to play until the summer? Then does that mean that some of us are not going to be here anymore? Are we not going to play at all? That means that none of us are going to be here anymore. And so as we got into May, we were really aggressive in an offer that we gave to season ticket members. And so we told them that if you rolled over at least 85% of what you paid for 2020, you would get a 15% discount on your seats in 2021. So pretty much the entire month of May, which is normally a really big sales month for us, we're wrapping up season ticket memberships. You're really getting heavy into the groups and suites and the bigger hospitality stuff. We pretty much renewed all of our season ticket members in May for 2021. That normally happens now. So because of the offer being as aggressive as it was, where we basically were offering people money back and they wouldn't have to repay that money, it was so aggressive that we had a lot of people saying, what's the catch? Like, this almost sounds too good to be true. And so we renewed 90% of our accounts in May for this year. And so now we only have like 400 accounts that we're chasing after that hadn't paid. And because we've had a lot of staff turnover, which I'll get to, because we didn't have everybody still here to kind of fill in the blanks. Everybody who refunded in full, we invoiced them for their seats for this coming season, because we didn't want to have somebody that had said to me, hey, Mike, you know what? Because of this, that, and the other, we're high risk, or I'm out of my job right now. I need the money back because I need to buy groceries. We didn't want somebody who had said that, but then said, hey, things, if they get better, we're coming back next year. We want our same seats. We didn't want somebody to lose their seats. And so now we're kind of combing through those 400, but it has freed us up more to sell more for next year. But so we got to the end of May, and May is really when kind of the hammer dropped for us. Our sales department at the time had 45 people in it total, including some support staff. Now we're down to 15. So we kept one sales rep from each team. We kept all of our managers, and then we have a sales strategy team that helps more of like the hardcore marketing of our products and all of our digital events and stuff like that. So June was really tough. It was kind of like the survivor's guilt for the group of us that are still around. So it took a little bit for us to get through that, but then through the summer, it was more data entry, and it was, hey, the season started great. We might have to pause because the Marlins couldn't stay out of the club, or chicken, whatever it was that they were out on the town, and the Cardinals, then you had their whole team basically have to stop playing, and so it was a little bit dicey there. But the season as a whole for us, the Mariners was actually pretty solid. We have a unanimous Rookie of the Year, which hasn't happened in 10 plus years. 2 Gold Glovers, one Evan White is a rookie this year that we signed to a 6-year deal before he even played in Major League Baseball. JP Crawford, who we got as part of, if you don't know anything about the Mariners, go look up Jerry DiPoto and look up the number of trades he's made in the last couple of years, and you'll be able to have a good time and try and look through that trade tree. So now we are transitioning out of I'm not going to say losing on purpose, but not trying to actively be super competitive and trading a bunch of our veteran players after an 89 win season a couple years ago for a bunch of prospects. And you mentioned the NBA draft this night. I actually didn't know that. I couldn't even tell you who's going first tonight. Basketball is the one sport I don't watch. But what the NBA and the NFL have created a problem for Major League Baseball is the draft, right? You draft the first overall pick in Major League Baseball, or your first round pick in Major League Baseball usually takes 3 to 5 years to get there. So yes, you're trading for prospects, but Joe Schmo, average baseball fan, doesn't care about a prospect. They care about the guys that they know. So when we traded, Robinson Cano and Eddie Diaz for, now Jared Kelenic is a highly touted prospect and, top 10 in the league and will probably be a major leaguer next year. You still don't get the positive reaction because, it's just another prospect, or, we don't even know who that guy is. Everybody talks about how good their prospects are all the time, whether they're good or not. So the season itself, once we started playing, honestly, it was just like normal, just weird. We weren't in the ballpark and we weren't at games. But we kind of just watched games and we had a pretty good year and we're in the playoff hunt. And it really actually helped us sell some stuff in September because people now are starting to see that the young crop of players are coming and the era of mass Jerry trades. I honestly think he's made 100 in the last 5 years, which in Major League Baseball is super weird. You're starting to see the names stick around and you're starting to see these prospects play in the league. That has helped us to now we're doing a lot more sales automation. So, in a way, going to such a small department probably happened because we have software that is sending emails for us. I'm sending 5,000 emails a week because that's the maximum number of emails that the software will allow us to send. So in an environment where I don't have an automation platform that's sending 5,000 emails a week, that's not happening. So, transitioning to now, we're still really small. There's still only 15 of us. There's still only 4 sales reps. We're selling for next year. Like nothing's going to change in part because it's easy to explain to somebody that, we're anticipating the ballpark to be open and stuff like that. Versus saying, well, it might be this or it might be that. If it's this, then it's going to be this list of things. If it's that, then it's going to be this list of things, right? And it's really hard to know because things are changing so rapidly. A couple months ago, it felt like we'd gotten through the worst of it, and now it's worse than it ever has been. And so, people are a little apprehensive, and kind of our message has been like it was at the beginning: we're going to do right by you. Really our message has been until a game gets played, everything is fully refundable. Typically once you're paid in full for us, we won't refund people, but now it's pay now, use our payment plans. You can stretch things out. And until a game gets played, I'll definitely be able to refund you. And if games get played and something is going on, let's have an open dialogue. So this goes back to the relationship that I'll tell people, just be honest with me and tell me what's going on and keep me in the loop so I can advocate for you. And it allows them to feel comfortable with paying or committing to next year without really fully committing. So now, honestly, here in November, it's kind of business as usual, except for the fact that I'm still at home with a now 8-month-old or 7-month-old and a soon to be 5-year-old that, you may even hear them in the background a little bit, but That's kind of the oddest piece of all this. And I'm doing my normal job at home and making calls from, my son's bedroom. Our baby gets diaper changes on the floor because I took the top of the dresser, which was the changing table, now has my standing desk and 2 monitors and a keyboard and a mouse. So the changing pad has been relegated to the living room floor. So she gets kind of shafted, but we're really kind of doing business as normal in terms of selling for now. Until we may shut things off. So around the election, kind of all in the same, things are kind of crazy. During the election, it was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We didn't send any emails because we kind of didn't know what was going on. And you didn't know, if you know anything about Seattle, we have protests and we have things, and stuff out here can get a little hairy. And so depending on the way the election was going to go, we've been dealing with a lot of defund the police has been a big movement here. It's a big part of the conversation. And, we have, Washington is very similar to Pennsylvania in that it's a really big state and most of the people live in the cities. And so the cities lean one way and the rest of the state leans the other way. And so we've been dealing with a lot of issues of, if Seattle City Council is going to defund the police department, we're not coming to games because we don't feel safe, even though the stadium's nowhere close to where any of the demonstrations and the protests and things are. It's literally right off the highway. And what we've found is that the Mariners pay the police officers that do security for our games. It's not the city. So educating people on, hey, you know what? We're obviously going to secure the ballpark. Our top priority, like it is with every other venue, is to secure your ballpark and make your fans feel safe and stuff like that. So because of some of the responses we've been getting, we paused everything for a little while just to let things cool down. So there could be a time in the fall here, if things continue to get way worse, that we would pause again and just kind of reading the room, so to speak. But for the most part now, we're kind of just operating like normal and, worried about when we eventually get back in the office and our inbound line is on and there's only 4 people instead of, 25, and having to manage the load of, I went from 187 accounts pre-COVID to now I manage 950. And that's just people who have bought, and that's not people that I'm trying to sell new to and stuff like that. So the workload is considerably higher now, but you're still kind of operating. We've kind of gone back to operating like we normally would, and that'll probably change once the season starts, depending on whatever the restrictions are. Because there definitely are going to be restrictions. I think it's a little crazy to even consider 40,000 people in the ballpark on April 1st, which is opening day for us. Seems kind of crazy at this point.
I don't think it's crazy at all. And what you're saying, I don't think it's crazy at all. I think it's not going to happen, but that's just my opinion. Right. So Kyle, I'm going to shift over to you for a minute. There's a couple of questions in the chat. I want to shift over to you, let you moderate, and let Mike answer some questions from the group.
Perfect. Thank you. So we have a student attending tonight who has a sales internship with minor league baseball team next semester. And he's just looking for, any advice that you may have for him heading into this internship, during COVID, with minor league teams, and any other advice that you may have for him.
Yeah. I mean, my first thing is, hell yeah, that's awesome. The best thing you could do as a student is get an internship that gives you real experience with a team. The thing that, again, as someone who aspires to be a hiring manager, the things that will stand out to me are other teams, because that means that you have skills that somewhere else, some other organization, they're all super competitive, whether it's minor leagues or major leagues or whatever it is, they're all super competitive. So that immediately stands out to me as somebody who, hopefully next year or beyond will be interviewing people. So that's kind of the first thing is, kudos to you for the hard work to get to that point and get a position like that. As far as being with a minor league team, I mean, just do everything and try every type of lead that they give you and go into it with an open mind and, really try and spend some time on what works and what doesn't work. Try new things. And if you think it sounds kind of goofy and it doesn't work, then just don't say whatever it is you're going to say. Like in my first year around the new year, I was leaving voicemails that in some shape or form were saying, hey, it's a new year, so why don't we have it be a new you and buy some Mariners season tickets, which sounds really kind of corny, which I'm okay with. Like I love dad jokes and the whole 9 yards. So that stuff worked for me. It was very natural for me. It didn't really work that well, so I have since stopped using it. but really just experiment with stuff, because the only way you're really going to find out if something works is if you try it. Pick the brains of other reps that are there, full-time reps, or other interns, or the managers, even if it's a different department. Really get a better understanding of, hey, what do you do that makes you successful, and those kinds of things, because there's no need to reinvent the wheel, right? You don't need to start from nothing when you have the resources around you. So really take advantage of the people that are there, especially in a sales in the sales department. But the other big thing, branch out, and you're the best thing you could do from a networking perspective. You're already in the organization, so if you need to talk to your manager first and say, hey, I have an interest in marketing, or learning a little bit more about what the marketing department does. It's never going to be easier for you to sit down with the director or manager, or whatever the structure is, the person who leads the marketing department, and pick their brain on how they got where they are, and what are some skills that you look for, and what are things that I can do to be successful, and do that all across the organization. Because maybe you find out that sales isn't your thing, or it just reaffirms that sales is your thing, or you have a mentor now that's in a different department that can give you more perspective, or better yet, someone that opens the door for you, right? You don't know who they know with other teams. So while it is most important for you to focus on your actual job as an intern, don't lose sight of the resources that are around you all throughout the team, and really take advantage of that. Don't let that go to waste.
So do minor league baseball teams have more freedom when selling tickets than a professional team?
A big part of my intern experience was pretty much all minor leagues until I did the Flyers. And my big thing that I learned is I didn't want to be in minor league sports as a professional, because it's hard. Minor league sports are way harder. One, a lot of times you have to explain what team you're calling from and who the team is, if they're not, if they're not super popular, if they're relatively new, or whatever the case may be. You also work significantly longer hours because the staff is smaller. So, you may be a sales intern as your day job, but then during game days, you're doing marketing, you're doing promotions, you're doing this, that, or the other. You're pulling tarp, right? Like, everybody in the organization is doing multiple jobs. Whereas in a major league team, our sales department is our sales department. We really don't do anything else. Like, granted, we have a roof, so we don't really pull tarp. But if you were in a ballpark that had to pull tarp, your director of sales is not out on the field pulling tarp, right? So there are big differences between the two, but that means there's also a lot more opportunity in minor league baseball, because you're going to do a lot more. You're going to be exposed to a lot more, because you have to be. There just aren't as many people. So I realized, and I interviewed with the Red Wings a long time ago now, and as part of that, a lot of their folks had come from minor league baseball, and they had joked that the goal of minor league baseball, or the goal of minor league sports, is to get out of minor league sports, because it's hard. It burns you out because you work longer hours. So it's all the same. A ticket is a ticket, but it's not rocket science. It's really not complicated, but minor league sports is definitely more of a grind, from what I understand. Having done it as an intern, not as a professional, or talking from others, it is definitely much more of a grind because there are less people.
So the next two questions kind of go together. One question is, what does a typical day look like for someone in your position? Obviously, probably looking at a game day. And then the next question is, what do your hours look like throughout the year? Obviously, during the season and then off season.
Yeah. They're definitely different for us. Out of season, I mean, it's more the standard 8 to 5, or 8:30 to 5:30. You're doing more meetings, so you're out of the office and driving around town and stuff like that more often. But for us, all of our leadership team, they all have kids, they all have young families. A lot of our department now have young families, so we don't get the pressure of you have to stay late or you have to come in early, and those sorts of things. So off season is very much more the 8:30 to 5:30, the standard hours that you would assume. In season for us, we are again super unique in that we don't work game day shifts, so we don't do sales tables, we don't do any of that. So it's awesome. Like I can't even begin to tell you how nice it is to not have to stay until the 5th inning of every game. With the Pirates, they had a redemption table the group team would have to do. And so 2 or 3 times a homestand, you're there at least until the end of the 5th inning, which is generally 9:30 or 10 o'clock. And at that point, with a newborn at home, you're getting up at 8:30, you're in the office, and you're not getting home until 10:30. You miss the entire day. At the Pirates, we did a lot more in the ballpark. So I would work maybe some combination of 50 or 60 games a year. And so one time it was late August. It was my second year there. So it's like, you're getting at the end of the season, the team's not making the playoffs. You're still in the building and you're like, get me out of here. I left a perfect game in the 6th or 7th inning and didn't realize it was a perfect game until I got home. And had Rich Hill finished it, I would have said I stayed the whole game. But he someone hit a ball at third base, had an error, so it turned into a no hitter in the 9th. And then in the 10th inning, they brought him back out with a no hitter, and he gave up a walk off home run. So it's the only time in Major League history that a team has won 1-0 with one hit to break up a no hitter. And I left that game just because I didn't realize what was going on. And so how it's different here, if I'm staying for a game in Seattle, it's because it's a client that I want to see, that I want to spend time with, I need to get FaceTime with. So I'm picking and choosing when I stay, and it's much more targeted. So in season, you tend to stay a little bit more for game days and things like that. You can flex time. So if I was at the ballpark until 9 o'clock the night before, I won't go into the office until 10:30 or something like that to balance out the time. So out here, it's a lot more lenient. They want us to stay closer to 40 hours. They want us to have more of the work-life balance. So again, we're more unique in that sense that we don't have the sales tables. It's old habits die hard. Like I'm very much like, no matter how late I'm there, I'm going to be back at 8:30. And so it's still something that I try and get through. I'm not very good at work-life balance. But even during the season, while you have the occasional weekend and you have the occasional evening and stuff like that you're staying, out here for us, it's significantly different than everywhere else, where we don't do a lot of it unless if you're choosing to do it.
You kind of talked about work-life balance. So has working from home, has that changed anything with your work-life balance at all? Especially having, like a newborn and almost 5-year-old.
In some ways it's made it easier to balance. In other ways it's made it harder. So now like my email has never been more accessible. And so I'm still kind of nuts on responding to people really quickly. And so it is a lot harder. So with the baby, I'm up at hours no one ever wants to be awake with the number of hours of sleep. And so at the beginning, I was answering emails at 3 o'clock in the morning because I was up. I got nothing else to do. So I would get on and I would work 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning because I was up and I had everything here and I was working on a project or whatever that I just wanted to get things done. So in that sense, it was really bad. Now it's not quite the same. If both of my kids are sleeping and I want to take a lunch break, I'll just throw on my PlayStation and I can play MLB The Show. I can play whatever. I can play video games in the middle of the day because I can. I don't have to wake up and run at 5 o'clock in the morning in the dark. I can go in the middle of the day because I'm at home, and it doesn't matter if it takes me an hour and a half or 2 hours because no one can see me doing it anyway. I can stop working whenever I want now. So we've definitely done a little bit of that too. So it's kind of a balance, right? It's harder in some senses. Like if I can answer an email really quick, or if I think something needs an answer really quick, I just turn my computer on and answer it, and I probably shouldn't. But then at the same time, I can stop working, right? Like here it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So we finish this. I can say, I'm going to shut it down for the day and not go back to work. I could do that and no one will say anything. So it's been good and bad. I think the biggest positive for us coming out of this is that, work from home is not going away. And so again, we have our whole leadership team. They all have young families, and our director coaches. He has 4 kids and he coaches multiple teams. And so during the week, he's leaving 2 or 3 days a week at 3 o'clock to go coach baseball this or softball that or whatever it is. And so, it sounds like we're going to get 16 hours a week that we can flex or work from home on. So, if I'm going to coach my 5-year-old's t-ball team, traffic here is terrible. I can go into the office until 2 o'clock and then come home and work more before going to practice. Or I could just say, you know what, I'm not going to go into the office at all and just work from home and go coach t-ball and not have to worry about it and those sorts of things. So working from home is going to give us more flexibility down the road to be able to balance being an employee and being a parent. Right. Because at the end of the day, meeting with a client or going to my kid's t-ball game, going to the t-ball game is more important. So I'm going to go to the t-ball game and just tell whoever it is, hey, I'm not going to be around. I have to go coach t-ball. And so it's going to be easier to be able to balance those things and not get caught up in the, oh shit, I got caught up late, I'm going to be late to the game, and yada, yada, yada. Now I just take that out of the equation, and knowing myself, I just won't go to the office at all, because as soon as I go there, it'll be hard to leave. Something always comes up. So in the long run, this is going to end up benefiting us, because we're going to have work from home as an option, at least part-time.
So then, obviously, you said that you're going to have working at home kind of stick around. So that kind of leads into the next question of, what are some ways you think your job might change post-COVID?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest one. Honestly, like, I mean, you're kind of seeing it now. People are itching to go back to normal and kind of do whatever they want to do. And there's, having gone through, a lot of you are probably a little bit too young for a 9/11, but right, like post 9/11, a lot of things are really different than they used to be. Like, you turn on Home Alone and she's at the airport, the mom's at the airport, it's like, here's my ticket, you go, I can't, right, I'll trade you tickets. And like, the thought of that now is so insane. It's crazy to even think about that people could do that, right? And so, but at the end of the day, as soon as sports were back on in 2001, right? You look at Yankee Stadium, you look at the World Series, you look at all of these things, everything went back to normal in ballparks pretty quickly, except a little bit more security, right? And now you have the metal detectors and you have all of those things. But for the most part, the in-stadium, the sports experience is still the same. So I really think at the end of the day, once the vaccine is proven to be safe and it's easily accessible and all of those things, that people are going to go back to going to sporting events, and people are going to go back to, the all-inclusive buffet, right? If that's the experience that people want, that stuff is going to come back. And I think that people are going to want those things, are going to be willing to pay for those things, and all of that stuff will all happen again. So I really think the in ballpark experience will be the same. Where I think things change, work from home obviously is a big one. I also think that the way that we do events and engage with our season ticket members will be different. Not everything will be in person. We have so much experience now with doing virtual events and virtual Q&As and things much like this. We had calls with, again, Jerry DePoto is our GM, and we had groups of 10 to 15 season ticket members that, Jerry would give like a 25-minute presentation on prospects and here's kind of the state of the team. And then he took live questions from people. And so, I think that those things will stay, because why not? It takes up an hour of his time and he doesn't have to do it face to face. So I think we'll start to see a lot more of the virtual event as far as an engagement, the virtual Q&A, the YouTube watch parties, and those kinds of things. I think those things will still be around. But from a sales perspective, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all you're still doing the same thing. It might be a little bit rocky at the beginning. Some companies are gung-ho on being able to come back. Others are working from home until July. And, if they're not in the office, are they even going to be allowed to use tickets until then? So it'll be a little bit bumpy maybe next year, but 2022 and beyond, I really think that a lot of this stuff will be the same. Sports in general, the next bubble to burst is streaming games, right? Like blackouts and stuff like that. There is no way in the next 10 years that local blackouts are going to be a thing, right? Like, if I get MLB TV, I can't watch the Mariners. I can watch everybody else but them. There's no way, with all the cord cutting and all of these things, that does not become a thing of the past. And that's probably the next big bubble to burst in terms of sports. You're starting to see the gambling now. And so the way that people consume sports is a little bit different, but I think kind of the next big bubble to burst, as the collective bargaining agreements and things all expire, the TV contracts expire, you're going to start to see more streaming, local streaming, because that's just the way the world is going, right? If everybody's going to Reddit to find a stream for the game, the team might as well figure out a way to monetize a stream for the game instead of just giving all that stuff up, because whether they want it to happen or not, it's happening, right? So I think that's kind of the next big major change to sports as a whole. Along with just ticket things being much more flexible and everything's going digital and all that kind of stuff. But kind of the day-to-day on things that I do, I really don't think much will change once you get through the next year and a half.
So then looking back, I guess obviously to your college career at Cal U and, the beginning of your career, what was an item on your resume that made you stand out the most? Obviously these students are in college, so
yeah,
they're looking for sports outside of college. So what was one item on your resume that made you stand out?
Yeah, I think it was the volume of things that I did, right? So we mentioned the PIAA a little bit. So the PIAA is the high school athletics, the Pennsylvania Interscholastic Athletic Association. And my first day with them was the day after my first semester. And the way that it kind of went down for me, their state championships, Kyle, as you obviously know, are football or in Hershey. And so I went up to my professor. They said they needed volunteers. And I said, hey, I can see the stadium from my house. Like, I'm more than willing to go drive over there and help them out because I don't have to travel. Like, I already live there. And his thing was, hey, I appreciate that, but you're a freshman. We're going to give the upperclassmen the first chance to have the opportunity to do it. And it just so happened to turn out that there was a huge snowstorm. So the students that had offered to volunteer from Pittsburgh couldn't get there. And so because I said, hey, like, I'm happy to do it, I live right there. He called me a couple of days before and said, hey, they can't make it. Do you still want to do it? And so what turned out to be just volunteering for football went from doing football in the fall to doing wrestling over spring break to then being in the office in the summer and then doing football, wrestling, basketball, baseball, all of the big championships. I did that for 4 years. All 4 summers I was there. And the coolest part about it is I was getting paid as an intern before you were legally required to get paid as an intern. I think most teams and organizations now pay their interns, which they obviously should be. So I turned what was a volunteer experience into a summer job for lack of a better term. The office was 20 minutes away for 4 years. I did the City Islanders, which is a USL soccer team, did that for a summer or two. Obviously did the Flyers, was in our athletic department. And so I really think for me, it was the volume. It was kind of the diversity and the different experiences. If I had to pick one thing, I would guess it was probably the Flyers because it was a major league team. It's a professional team on a resume as a college student, which again, you're looking for something that stands out as a little bit different. As an intern, those jobs are still really hard to get. So if I had to pick one thing, my guess would be that it was the experience with the Flyers purely because it was a professional team amongst all the other minor league or high school, sports, whatever opportunities that I had is the one that I would pick. That from a name, simply from a name recognition, right? All the way in Seattle, they don't know what the PIAA is until I explain it to them. So I would think that the Flyers having the name recognition and the brand is what stood out and helped me in the long run.
So I have one last question before I pass it back to Sherman. Obviously, I saw that you were the Sport Management Club president at Cal U. So what kind of experiences did you offer to your students? I know when I took a tour there, they mentioned something about like sending their students to the Masters and, opportunities like that. So what kind of opportunities did you give your members?
Yeah. So we did a lot of stuff with the sport management program, but then a lot of our clubs on campus did a lot of things too. So when I was there, my senior year, like I said, I was in student government. I was our financial secretary. So I was in charge of the student activities budget. And so this was in 2012. Now our student activities budget was $3.4 million. So our clubs and organizations on campus had a lot of money. So we were doing a lot of things. And so as a sport management club, it's something that's directed by students and led by students. It's hard to really get a ton of traction on, doing a lot of things. So our biggest benefit and the things that we did and the things that we really encourage people to do would go to conferences and those kinds of things. So, we had speakers come and we had conferences on campus with our alums and those kinds of things. We maybe underutilized our resources on campus. Like we had conferences, we never had any of our coaches come and talk, right? You have a lot of people want to get into coaching. Why not get one of your coaches to come in and be a part of, your program, or someone in your athletic department who does fundraising or compliance, or your athletic director, the assistant athletic director, whatever it may be, come in and be a part of the experience of the program, your equipment managers, all of that. We kind of missed the boat on that. It's gotten a little bit better since then. But, kind of big picture, right? So our experience with going on and doing different conferences and stuff, we did Mount Union always does like a big sports sales combine conference that, at the end of it, it's like speed dating. You can sign up submit your resume and get 15-minute interviews with however many teams, right? Like you're basically they're basically screening you for an interview for their inside sales team. You still have to submit a resume. They still have to call you and pick you to get one of the spots. And so, going and doing things like that, or offering, to pay for the registration was the biggest thing. So school, because we had a budget, the club would pay for registration, they'd pay for the transfer, and they'd pay for the transportation and the hotel. So all you had to pay for were your food and drinks and stuff like that. So it really eliminated the barriers to entry, right? Like now, and it should be like this, right? There's a lot more conversation around diversity and inclusion and eliminating those barriers. So because our budget, our activities budget was so big, or at least as campus as a whole, the way we allocated that money was to try and cover as much of the costs for students to go and do these things, as opposed to hosting events. And wasting the money maybe is a bad way to put it, because it's definitely, you're not wasting it by doing an event, but the off-campus, the conference experience, and the real live interview experience is way more valuable than anything we could have hosted. And so we really advocated for people to go to the conferences and really take advantage of those interviews and stuff like that. Because as a college student, to go and have 12 interviews is great. I mean, for me, I ended up not getting a job from any of them. I interviewed with the Red Wings. I got a final interview with them, and it was because of the conference. Had some relationships with other hiring managers that were at other teams, some that I still talk to now, even though I never actually worked for them. So it has helped in the long run. So those are the things. That's probably the biggest thing that we did a lot of. We advocated for people to go. And in terms of, like I said earlier, having hard conversations, if it came down to trying to decide who is going, sometimes the professors would step in and decide based off of who, the professors know who is working hard and who is mailing it in and checking the box. And so, if someone had to make the decision, the professors had to make the decision, or, we would do something else for the other person, or you would go more lean the upperclassmen as opposed to the underclassmen and stuff like that. But, it was great to be able to try. I mean, I traveled all over. I went to Disney for 5 days and spent $40 because school paid for everything for me. I went down to Chapel Hill. I went to DC. I went to Cleveland, which I guess kind of pales in comparison to the rest of them. But, I was able to go all over the country without paying for any of it, because the school, that's where we allocated our dollars to those conferences. And back east, right, like that's a challenge we have out here. The Mariners don't travel and do a lot of these events because you have to travel really far to get to something. And we don't host a lot of the career nights and things like that a lot of the East Coast teams do, because to get to us, you're really only getting UW, University of Washington, which is right down the street because they're in Seattle. Washington State's in Pullman, which is a couple of hours away. Gonzaga's even farther away, out in Spokane. The University of Oregon is a couple hours away. So we don't have the ability to host all of these nights, because students, right, if we're going to do it on a Thursday night and you're going to drive 5 hours, you still have class the next day, right? And you don't do it on the weekend because that's your free time, right? As a student, you're not driving to Seattle on a Saturday and wasting your weekends. So those are some challenges that we have out here. But back east, it was amazing because hop in the car, right? You know this, you guys both know this, right? On the East Coast, if you hop in the car and drive 5 hours, it's really not that big of a deal, versus if you drive 5 hours here, it's a lot. People fly here, they don't drive.
Well, Kyle, I'll take that segue into my final portion of the show. Mike, I always end our episodes with you having the opportunity to provide that one parting shot, that last bit of advice, the big piece of advice that you have for students that could really help propel them into a career or into a line of work that they really want to do in sport. So the floor is yours. What is that parting shot that you have?
Yeah, I'll do two. One, this is more COVID related. I've never had more free time during the day in my life, and I'm home. And so we have a dog that I have to walk for, throughout the day, 20, 30 plus minutes. I'm always open to conversations and talking through, specific questions and just what your goals and aspirations are. Like I said, I'm aspiring to be a hiring manager. So at some point that could be something that I have some control over. So if there's anyone that, in the program that's listening or tuning in or whatever the case may be that, wants to talk some more, send me a message on LinkedIn. You have my email, send me an email and we can figure out a time to talk and do a little bit more one-on-one. But my biggest thing is, I wouldn't say find a place on Craigslist, move in 3 days before your first day of work without seeing anything and showing up to work on your first day is the best idea. So I definitely would not advocate for that. If you have the ability to go and check things out first, definitely do that, or have somebody look at it for you. But my biggest piece of advice is don't be picky at the beginning. It's really hard industry to break into, and it's really hard to be selective. If someone says, I'm a big football fan, I only want to work in the NFL, and I only want to work in Indianapolis, well, your only choice is the Colts, right? And if the Colts don't have anything open, you have no option. So you can always go back home. I'm not a baseball fan at all. Like, I am because I talk about baseball all the time, but baseball is not a sport that, I won't turn on the World Series just to watch the World Series. I won't turn on a game in the middle of July just to watch a baseball game because I'm just not that big of a fan. And so it has really helped me in not being a baseball fan. The fact that I work in baseball, it doesn't take away my affinity for watching the sport, my affinity for being a fan. I'm much more of a hockey fan. But I like Major League Baseball because one of the biggest benefits of selling Major League Baseball is that there are so many games. We have 81 home games every year. We always have inventory. One of the challenges in Major League Baseball is we have so many games. We have 81 games. We always have inventory, so it's hard to drive urgency. I tell you this because you hear so many times that somebody is sport specific or city specific, and you're really doing yourself a disservice because your chance of getting a job is so much smaller in an industry that's really hard to break into. If you move away from home and you don't like it, the benefit is you can always go back, and you have the added benefit of having a little bit of experience under your belt. So if there is one team that you really want to get into, you can reach out to somebody who is in a position and a hiring manager that they may not have spots in open right away, but you can reach out and say, hey, I am at this team or that team doing this. I'd love to have a 15-minute, 20-minute conversation with you about opportunities you may have down the road, and use it more of a network opportunity and see if you can create a spot for yourself. But it's really hard to be super specific right at the start, because if that falls through, then you're out of luck and now you're stuck. It's year 2, year 3 out of college and you still haven't gotten that first job, and now you have to give up the dream or the desire to work in an industry that you're obviously working towards, and you don't even give yourself a real chance to get in it and have success and see if you like it. So my advice would be to be open and be willing to try something different, be willing to move away from home or move away from wherever you are now, and try something new. And if it works out, great. You may find another part of the country you never knew you'd like as much as you do, or you may find out you don't like it and you go back and you try and find a job somewhere else with a little bit of experience.
That's awesome advice. I'd love to hear that. Yes, branch out and go as far away as you can and come back if you have to. Thank you to Mike here for being on here tonight. Thank you to all the attendees for coming here tonight. Mike, the advice is always welcome, always great, and you're always welcome with the IUPUI Sports Management Club. You're an honorary member now, so from coming at us from Seattle, so being willing to come on. So thank you very much, and I thank you for the students. Just to plug the next one, we're starting our break sessions. So we've got break coming up, the end of the semester coming up, 3 weeks online, and then we head to break. But we're getting ready to add some more speakers to the series this break. That might be a little longer than we had ever anticipated. But December 4th, the Friday, December 4th at 1 o'clock, our next guest is going to be Cam Fuller from the Horizon League here in Indianapolis. He's going to be a local guy. He's a guest, and he's going to be a great show. I'm here to tell you, he's going to do a great job. Mike, I don't even know what to say, man. You came to us from Seattle, and it's amazing that we had somebody on from we've had somebody from LA now, we've had somebody from Seattle. It's been phenomenal to really reach out to you guys and connect with Mike on LinkedIn. Send him a message, say thank you, whatever, connect with him. I'm sure he's more than willing to talk with you. So thanks again, Mike. Kyle, great job as usual. And we will see you on December 4th. Get registered. Kyle will send out that link, and check out tonight. We're going to have fun tonight on the draft show starting at 7:30. So we'll see you then, and have a great night.